Hi everybody, welcome to Deep Six, the Deep State. See my new logo? This is an official video of Facebook now. We just got that status and it officially starts on August 29th. What this means is that in the future you'll be able to access me by going to facebook.com and then / either watch or Deep Six, the numeral, the Deep State. If you go to watch, which will be a fairly well-known click in the future, you get a whole menu of all of the videos that Facebook has. I'm the one that is not Wide World of Wrestling. I'm the guy who's not in the tiger suit. I'm the guy who's not doing something crazy. It's one of only 2 public affairs videos they have. The other is Left Wing, called The Young Turks, a good show, by the way. And it's kind of an honor because I feel like I'm on the ground floor of a new TV network. Also, I have to ask your indulgence, but after next week they allow advertising. So you will be interrupted periodically by film ads, but they will not run more than 15 seconds each, and they won't be stacked up. You'll just take 15 seconds out of my blurb. So that's pretty cool. Now, we're in a situation, though, with Trump that is certainly uncool. And I want to talk about that today because I'm very upset about it. The departure of Steve Bannon really means, in effect, that Trump has lost his soul. The Trump presidency, as we've known it, is just about effectively over. And I can see where it goes from here, and it's not a pretty picture. Every president gets elected with a bunch of supporters who, if he's smart, he brings into the White House with him, and he governs with them at hand. Sometimes they don't, like Bush Sr. One group got him elected, but they had nothing to do with the administration. Others, like Bush Jr., brought Karl Rove and others into his administration, and he was better off. But the problem is that Trump has not defended these folks. And one after another, they've been forced out by the permanent bureaucracy that we call the deep state, the guys who've always been there, who work with the lobbyists and the media and the special interests and push those agendas, and do not have the president's interest at heart, just the interest of the deep state and of their clients. And that's really what happened to Bannon. Now, the New York Times ran an article today describing what happened to Bannon. And I'd like to read it to you and decode it as I'm reading. But as Mr. Trump struggled last week to contain a growing public furor over his response to a deadly race-fueled melee in Virginia, Mr. Bannon clashed with Mr. Kelly, his new chief of staff, over how the president should respond. Now, of course, that's the New York Times dragging Charlottesville in just simply so they can mention it in the first paragraph and remind everybody about it, in case the other 48 articles on it in today's edition didn't remind them enough. Give no ground to your critics, Bannon urged the president, with characteristic truculence. Again, put Bannon down by calling him truculent. But really what Bannon was saying is stand up for your guns. Attack the right-wingers, the crazies, the Klan and the white supremacists. God, don't defend them, and be much more virulent in attacking them than he was. But label it for what it is. This is an effort to distract attention from my agenda and to try to get me on a new scandal now that Russia's kind of fading. Then, at the same time, New York real estate investor friends told Mr. Trump that the situation with Bannon was untenable. Steve Roth on Monday, Tom Barrack on Tuesday, Richard Lefrak on Wednesday. Now, what that means is that the deep state descended on Trump. All of his old buddies in real estate, his old developer friends, came down on him and said, hey, you better get over to the establishment. And they were ginned up to do that by the New York Times. They take everything in the New York Times as gospel. They're not smart enough politicians to think past that. And their version of succeeding politically is to do whatever the New York Times tells you. And they're just slavish to that. By Thursday, Bannon undercut American policy in North Korea. And Trump concluded that Bannon was too much of a liability. All Bannon did was to say what everybody else knows, which is that there is no military option in North Korea, and that it's just garbage to say that there is. And Bannon said that, and he shouldn't have said that. It was a faux pas. It was a big error, because you're not supposed to say that. Because if you say that, North Korea might feel you're not going to blow up the world if they attack. By the way, they're wrong. We will. But they won't attack because they think that. But then by Friday, when he was forced from his job, Bannon found himself... Now, this describes Bannon, but it also describes me, the situation I was at with Bill Clinton in 95 and 96. Wholly isolated inside a White House where he once operated with such autonomy that he reported only to the president himself. That was me. He had lost the war against a list of enemies that included nearly everyone in the West Wing. They included not just adversaries whose conflicts with Bannon were aired, Gary Cohn, the president's economic advisor, General McMaster, national security advisor, Ivanka, and Jared. Also against him was Kelly, who was annoyed over the Korea thing. What that says is that basically he was up against the entire deep state and trying to hold out for his point of view, which was really the president's point of view. I mean, there's a wonderful saying by Robert Frost. Poetry is about the grief, politics is about the grievance. And what Trump did was articulate the grief, and what Bannon did was translate it into an actionable grievance, a platform, and a program. And he'd done a wonderful job of doing that. And what happened is that the whole rest of the establishment congealed around him and knocked off everybody who could possibly have an opinion other than theirs. They got rid of Mike Flynn, the incoming national security advisor. They got rid of Reince Priebus, the chief of staff. They got rid of Sean Spicer, the press secretary. They sidelined Jeff Sessions, and now they are getting rid of Bannon. And one after another, they picked these folks off, and their place was taken by permanent members of the establishment, a staff that Bush could have appointed, or Bush Sr. could have even appointed. In many cases, Bill Clinton could have appointed them. And they're not loyal to Trump. They're not loyal to his agenda. They know nothing of what he told people when he ran. They are simply loyal to what the deep state wants them to do. And that's the administration of strangers into which Trump has plunged himself. And the formula for manipulation was simple. On the one hand, you trap Bannon in a few statements that you can distort out of context. And then you get a lot of publicity about how strong and powerful he is. There was a book out called The Devil's something or other, a bargain, I think, which is the Trump-Bannon relationship. And once he was on the cover, I think, of Time. I was on the cover of Time, and I was fired a week later, sitting on Clinton's shoulder, whispering in his ear. When they give you publicity, it's to incite the jealousy of the president and get him to fire you, and that's just what happened to Bannon. So the problem is that we're dealing here with a deep state that is manipulating everything and controlling the outcome. And they couldn't control Bannon, so they arranged for his execution. And Trump is manipulated by jealousy, by all sorts of human emotions, except gratitude, and he ends up doing what they say, even though it's really self-destructive. Because I don't think he understands how at variance his positions are and his ideas from what the establishment would have him do. And if he turns over the keys to the car to the establishment, they're going to run it into the ground.
Dick, I have two questions for you. The first one is, doesn't this free Bannon to fight the fight in a more effective way?
It does free Bannon to fight the fight, and I think you'll hear a lot of him from Breitbart. But come on, there's nothing more influential than running the country. I can trace over 100 initiatives the coal industry to do clean coal. Where do we put? Yeah,
there we go. We're back. Okay.
Sorry.
Lost the signal for a second.
I promised not to say anything during that interregnum. And there's nothing more powerful than that. So this is not a happy story.
Now, Dick, you have a very loyal follower. His name is Jay Gould, and he tried desperately to get some questions in on Friday, and I missed them, so here it is. This is for you, Jay. Dick, why would Hillary be offered a plea deal? That's not justice.
Because they don't want to try her, because they don't want the specter of a defeated candidate for president on trial. It looks too much like a Latin American banana republic, where the progression is you go from middle-level office to top office to president to jail. And they didn't want that to happen, and they didn't want to risk a trial because they might lose it. And they felt that Hillary might accept that. She won't. I know she won't, because when Bill hinted to me that it might be better if he pardoned Hillary so that she was out of the line of fire and this wouldn't consume his administration, she had a total fit, saying, I don't want us to pardon, I wouldn't take a pardon, I'm going to fight this and save my reputation.
Jody Adair wants to know, should we lose hope?
No, don't lose hope, but get mad. So let me continue playing this out. I think one of three things is going to happen now. The least likely, which is what I want, is for Trump to name his own special prosecutor, go after Mueller for the leaks from his office, and stand firm and hard for his positions, and make the world come round to him. And eventually he could do that. Eventually you can do that as president. Nobody has your power, even if they look like they have power, from the inside the White House. They don't have the power that you have. The one that I think will happen is that I think Trump will become a kinder and gentler Donald Trump, which is to say he'll make some changes, sell out his positions, and end up getting praise from the media for growing on the job. I think he'll reach out to the Democrats, and they'll pass a bipartisan Obamacare Reform Act, which the conservatives will vote against, but enough of the moderate sellout rhino types will vote for. With solid Democrats, it'll be enough to pass it. It'll keep Obamacare in place. In certain ways, it may even strengthen it. But it'll be thought to be a reform and a change and get rid of the bad aspects of Obamacare. And the press is going to push that line. Everybody will fall for it until they start getting the bills from their insurance companies, and then they'll get mad as hell, but be too late. The tax reform, they'll probably do some nominal tax cutting, probably exempt a lot of people from paying any tax at all, and hail it as a revolutionary reform, which it won't be. It'll just be tinkering. The border wall won't get built. They'll have virtual fencing, X-rays and satellites and lasers and all that stuff, not anything hard like a wall. They'll renegotiate NAFTA to make it look better. There'll be a few provisions about auto parts and stuff, but nothing significant, and everybody will declare it changed and reformed, problem solved, and go on their way. And that formula, which is Trump sells out, the Democrats help him sell out, the moderate Republicans cloak his sellout, the media lauds the sellout as progress, and the image of Trump as president soars, his job approval goes way up, and nothing happens to help the country. That's my view of what's going to happen. The other is that he doesn't go along with any of that. He stays for his point of view, but he doesn't do it effectively, in which case he's out on his butt, either by impeachment or by the 25th Amendment. It's not a happy story, but it is repairable if Trump acts right.
Dick, the Iron Triangle is very powerful. Do you know what I refer to as the Iron Triangle? Ben Cowger? I'm sorry.
Is that the Bermuda Triangle?
Sorry
I
about
love
that.
triangles, though. Triangulation. Okay.
I have another one for you. Daryl Stafford wants to know, why hasn't President Trump named AntiFur a terrorist group?
Why hasn't he named AntiFur a terrorist group? He should. It's a new group. I mean, it goes back to the 20s, but it is more or less a new group, and maybe it takes a little while to process it. But he should, and I'll bet that Sessions ultimately does. But it might take some time for him to do that. Now, we had a very interesting and frankly encouraging development in Ohio. A judge in a court in Ohio, a trial court, was returning to his office, and he was ambushed by a guy with a gun, and the guy shot at him. I don't think he hit him. The judge carried a gun, and he shot back 5 times, and he killed the guy who shot at him. And a state trooper ran to the scene, but was too late to do anything. Now, it has long been my point of view that you have more guns, you will have less crime. And there couldn't be a more graphic example than this. An assassination of a judge. And because the judge was taking advantage of the law that permitted him to carry a loaded firearm, he defended himself and killed the assassin. Now, how many times would that cause an assassin to second guess, to stop, not to attack? Because he knows that there's a good chance that the judge or the victim will be armed. And this is just a marvelous example of it, and I think a very important one. Now that we've gotten the statues down, or beginning to take them down, there's a lot of other stuff that's on the block. One is Stone Mountain. I guess you're familiar with that. It's in Georgia, outside of Atlanta, and it's on the face of a mountain like Mount Rushmore. It's meant as a successor to Mount Rushmore. And it has General Lee, Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederacy. And they're walking ahead on horses, and the implication is onward together. I first learned about it when Martin Luther King, in his I Have a Dream speech, alluded to it. And he said, "Let freedom ring. Let it ring from the Appalachian Hills to Stone Mountain in Georgia. Let it ring from Lookout Mountain in Tennessee to something else." And now they want to demolish Stone Mountain. And I just think that this is needless inciting to riot. I had a conversation today with a talk show host, a radio host, who is a radio host in Charlottesville, Alabama, Virginia. And he said that there was a Klan rally several weeks before the main Charlottesville rally, and it was violent, and the cops used tear gas and clubs to suppress it, and it was really traumatic for the city. And they decided that if there was going to be another demonstration, they would not use tear gas, they would not go clubbing at people, they would not make arrests. They'd let them fight each other, and, die out of its own accord, because they didn't want to be seen as inciting it. And that, of course, led to this horrible situation with the death of this poor woman, and only 3 arrests. You have to ask yourself why, in a situation where there were so many injuries and 1 death, the cops made only 3 arrests. And I think that indicates that there was a desire to sort of lay back and let this thing run its course, either because they didn't want to be blamed or because they wanted to cause celeb and an incident that could provoke rhetoric against Trump and against the administration. Now, this is sponsored, as the videos all are, by the Patriot Gold Group. Go to patriotgold.com or call 648, sorry.
1-800-476-5675.
Pardon me.
And I'll be posting it.
Okay, excuse me. I barely know my own phone number. According to the weekly Commitments of Traders report from the Commodity Futures Trading Corporation, released last week, net longs in gold rose 30% for the week, ended on Tuesday. And long contracts, are at their highest level among speculators since October. There were 180,000 long contracts this week, and the previous week there were 140,000. A long contract means that you believe that the price of gold will go up. So you buy a contract which says, if it's now $1,300 an ounce, I want to buy when it gets to $1,310. And when it gets to $1,310, zap me right into that market so I don't lose any momentum. And the more long contracts there are, the more it's predicting an increase in price. And gold is right now at 1,297. It's just a few dollars short of 3,000. of 1,300, and it probably will break 1,300 this week. So gold is moving up because of the need for a safe haven, the feeling that everything is so unstable, you better put some of your money in gold. And you know what I think? You better put some of your money in gold. At least I have. Whether you do or not, I don't know, and I'm not qualified to give you advice legally. But I can tell you what I do.
Now, this is a question from a previous contest. Well, winner, semi-winner. The person's name is Gail Maxey, and he was teasing me because we thought he was a she. So anyway, he has a great question, though. Is anyone in the Department of Defense going to look at the possibility North Korea is paying the large ships to ram our destroyers that have the capability of shooting down their missiles?
Very good question. Are the North Koreans paying ships to ram our destroyers? We just had another one rammed over the weekend. That's very possible. And that's a game North Korea is going to lose. But listen, let me back off and talk a little bit about Korea. I'll tell you two things. Number one, Kim Jong-un isn't going to launch missiles at anybody. This is all talk and bluff and bluster. And Trump's not going to attack North Korea preemptively either. Neither side is going to do what they're threatening to do. I lived through so many decades of the Cold War during MAD, mutually assured destruction. And everybody was rattling their sabers at everybody. Khrushchev said, "We will bury you. Your grandchildren will live under communism." And it was all this heightened rhetoric. And it disguised the fact that they were impotent, that nuclear weapons didn't mean a damn thing. The only thing nuclear weapons meant was that if the other guy has nuclear weapons, nobody has nuclear weapons. Because the results in Japan were so horrific at the use that nobody would dare use them again, and nobody would want to, and the results of a retaliation would be terrible. As Phil Gramm, the senator from Texas, once said, "When the lion lies down with the lamb, it is very important that the lion be the United States of America." And that's the point. We have an arsenal that's bigger than anybody's, better than anybody's, and that assures peace. Nobody's going to screw with us because of that. North Korea is not going to attack anybody, and we're not going to do a preventive strike because we know damn well that North Korea is not going to do anything. And these two leaders are yelling at each other, posturing like kids in a schoolyard, precisely because of their weakness and their impotence. Trump knows that he can't attack North Korea preventively. Clinton could have, and he blew the opportunity. But Trump can't. North Korea is already nuclear. And Kim Jong-un knows that he can't use those weapons. He'll destroy himself much more than he'll damage South Korea. The chance to solve this problem was in 1993 and 1994. And the guy who screwed it up was Jimmy Carter. In 93 and 94, North Korea was hurtling toward developing its nuclear capacity. And Bill Clinton and Al Gore got together and said, we're going to have to stop this. We're going to have to do sanctions and perhaps a preventative strike. And it took a lot to screw up Clinton's courage to do that. He would always second-guess himself, what if, what if, what if. It took forever to get him to bomb Bosnia. We worked at that for 6 months. And he was so reluctant to use force. But after a while, he had screwed his courage up and was going to do that. And right in the middle of that crisis, Jimmy Carter goes to North Korea, unasked. Didn't even tell Clinton he was going until he was there. He shows up in North Korea. He meets with Kim Jong-il at that point. And they come out shaking hands. The sun has come out, peace is at hand. North Korea has agreed to American demands. And that pulled the drug out completely from under what Clinton was planning to do, as Kim knew that it would. Now, in fact, Carter didn't get a damn thing. There was a commitment that they would abandon their plutonium plant. They didn't. There was a commitment that they would disclose their plants. They didn't. We, in return, committed to give them a year's worth of oil under the theory that they didn't have nuclear power. We didn't do that either. Congress sabotaged it because North Korea didn't deliver. But all that happened was everybody sat down, declared the crisis solved. Clinton talked about how he solved North Korea in the congressional elections of '94, and he was defeated, and nothing happened and nothing changed. But by now, it's just too late for that.
Dick, do you think there will be more of a crackdown on illegal voters in the midterm elections? Will they start requiring ID? Suzanne Bugby asks.
Great question. Will photo ID be required in the future? It depends on how quickly the Commission on Election Integrity that Trump formed is able to formulate its recommendations and to get them adopted. They are studying the extent to which people voted twice. And that doesn't mean that anybody voted twice. It means that somebody voted once for real and another person voted in their name at another address. Or a dead person was voted at his old address because the name wasn't deleted. In the past, this problem didn't arise because boards of elections would spend a lot of time and money verifying the accuracy of their voter rolls. They would send people a postcard and say, if you don't reply to this, your name will be stricken from the rolls because we'll assume you've died or you've moved. And Obama canceled the policy. Obama said, no, you can't do that. That will have a chilling effect on voting. And people who will not remember to return the card, they'll think they're not registered and they won't vote and will depress turnout, particularly in minority areas. Well, what it did was it enabled fraud because people were able to vote other people who had actually left. And a study in North Carolina revealed that over 70,000 ballots were cast by people whose names were voted in another state. And now there's a national study to see how prevalent that is. And when that study reaches its zenith and we have data, there might at that point be a very strong impetus for photo ID, not in the deep blue states, but in the swing states, which could go either way in the election. Now, there's something really important that's going on now about sanctuary cities and illegal immigrants. As you know, or should know if you've been listening to my stuff, the sanctuary cities thing is not the cops are walking down Main Street arresting Hispanics, and if they're in a church, they can't be arrested and they're given sanctuary. That's not it. What it is that somebody who is an illegal immigrant who commits a violent crime and is sent to a federal prison or a state prison and is incarcerated, when they're released on probation, parole, or having done their time, they get turned over to the immigration people to get deported. And the leftists don't want that. They want them to be able to walk right back out on the street and commit another crime. Now, but there's a new move from the Department of Justice. Sessions recused himself from a lot of stuff, but with the stuff that's left to his jurisdiction, he's doing a pretty good job. He proposed that the Justice Department be able to go to local sheriffs and say, hey, you have a guy in your cell, John Doe, who is here illegally, and he's serving a 5-year term for burglary, and his term expires next year. We would like you to turn him over to our jurisdiction, to our custody. We'll either take him off your hands physically and put him in a federal prison and we'll pay the bill, or we'll have jurisdiction over him even though he stays in your local facility. And then when his sentence is up, we own him. We'll be able to get rid of him right away. He won't ever have to pass from local to state to federal jurisdiction, which can be interdicted at any point. It's a brilliant policy, and important because local sheriffs want to get rid of these guys, but they're worried that they could have legal liability in doing it. This would insure them against that. And it's a very good policy. It really, I think, goes a long way toward accomplishing what the sanctuary cities policy was trying to do.
Dick, could all of the problems the left is causing possibly come back to bite them in the midterms? Roger Winter wants to know.
Roger Winter wants, oh, you've heard the question, I'm sorry. Well, Roger, I think that probably not, because I think Trump will do enough to overshadow that stuff. We have to realize that there are two levels on which Donald Trump is president. One is his policies, the other is his personality and who he is. And because of his personality and who he is, which on the one hand causes a lot of heartache with his tweets, people understand that there's a new game in town. You don't have to advertise to business that there's a new attitude toward regulation of business. You don't have to advertise to manufacturers that it's a new day in pollution controls. Everybody knows that who looks at the president. You don't have to go to Mexico and say, hey guys, don't come here illegally because you get thrown out. One glance at Donald Trump, you know that. And as a result, there's been enormous progress, not specifically because of the programs Trump initiated, but because of his attitude that he brought, which infuses enforcement at every level of the process and is amazingly constructive. So I think the economic record's going to look pretty good when Trump comes up in the midterms.
I have great news for our first launch of the watch page. We're number 6 in the world.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. So
Number 6 in the world of live views. That's terrific.
on the watch
Thank
channel,
you.
that's a
On the watch channel.
On the watch channel, yeah.
Wow. We're probably higher on our own channel. See, we're doing a transition now from Dick Morris Calm to Deep Six, the Deep State. And to access Deep Six, the Deep State, you could do both right now, but after a while we'll move it all over to Deep Six. You do one of two things. You go to facebook.com/watch, WATCH, and a menu comes up with a bunch of videos. Spot me. I'm the one without, I'm not in a wrestler outfit.
The one in the pink chair.
What? I'm in a pink chair. You could tell that. And then you can click on that and watch. The other alternative is that you go to Deep Six, the letter, Deep Six, the Deep State, and that'll bring you to the video. But I'm very honored to be included in this. It's one of like the first 40 or 50 programs on the Facebook TV network. We'll replace TV with FB. Now, the NAFTA talks are going on about improving the treaty. And the central issue relates to auto parts. What constitutes an American auto part? You can have a car where everything in it comes from someplace else, but is made in America. Or you can have a car where everything is made in America, but the car itself is made in Japan or China because of where it's assembled. And NAFTA is working on changing that, which would have a significant impact on the balance of trade and on American jobs in that industry. We'll keep focused on that.
Galen King would like to know, first of all, she says, Rogue Spooks is a fascinating book. Great research. How long did it take you and Eileen to write? Galen King.
Galen King asked about Rogue Spooks, our new book that is out now and entering its second week. She says it's a great book, a great read. It is. It's a page-turner. In fact, let me read you the first paragraph of it that gives you the feel for it. Eileen wrote this. The scheme has all the elements of a riveting spy novel. A polarizing billionaire presidential candidate considered crude and unworthy of the Oval Office by the political establishment he threatens, along with risque sex, blackmail, bribes, betrayal, special interests, back channels to Russia, spies, political intrigue, envy, and hatred. And it goes on like that. How long did it take us to write it? It was much, much more complicated than any other book we've ever written. We write very quickly. Normally it takes us only 2 to 3 months to do a book. This one took 5 to 6. And the reason was that developments kept changing. When we began the book, we had no idea what really went on. By the time we finished the book, we realized that the rogue spooks who pushed this dossier were probably fed the dossier from U.S. intelligence sources that didn't want Trump to get elected, or were fed it by other intelligence operations. And the other we realized is that, to a certain extent, this was an effort by some in the UK to influence the elections, not Russia. The other problem was that when we finished it, we had to vet it through lawyers, and different countries have different standards for that. And Britain's are more horrific than the United States, so this book cannot be sold outside of the United States. There are things you can say that are true, but will get you in trouble if you say it in the United Kingdom. And then on top of it, we had a constantly changing environment. So we basically had to write about 3 or 4 books till we ultimately said, the hell with it, this is the book. And we did it at a good time right after Mueller was appointed.
Wow. Barbara Cook wants to know, is there any news about the senator who met with Julian Assange?
It was a congressman named Dana Rohrabacher, who is terrible. He's he's horrible. He's a Republican, but he is Putin's congressman. He literally does everything the Russians want. He's a stooge. And he met with Assange in order to prove that the Russians had nothing to do with this. But Assange is no stooge. And when Assange said that he can prove beyond a doubt that the Russians did not hack the Democratic Party website, that's pretty significant. Really what it does is it makes this not a hack, but a leak. Not by the Russians, but probably by a staffer in the campaign for Hillary, or for the DNC, who was annoyed because he saw how the DNC was biased against Bernie in favor of Hillary, and leaked this stuff to catch them at their own game and force Schultz out and permit them to bring Bernie people into leadership in the party. That makes sense, and that probably is more likely what happened. And then Hillary hijacked the issue to make it look like Russian collusion so that they could try to stop Trump from winning or taking office after he won or serving out his term after he was sworn in.
Dick, do you think Trump is quietly working on purging the FBI and the CIA? Wendy Alexander Glaser asks.
Yes, I think he is, Wendy. I pray that he is. I hope that he is. The CIA. The problem with the FBI is that the guy who's now the acting director is Andrew McCabe, who, if anything, is worse than Comey. McCabe was his deputy and was with Comey every step of the way, but he's worse. His wife ran for state senator in Virginia, and the Democratic governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, contributed $600,000 to her campaign. So she was getting campaign donations running as a Democrat while her husband was deputy director of the FBI, allegedly investigating Hillary. And that conflict still exists. They haven't been able to force her out yet because they don't have a director that's been confirmed. The guy they've nominated, I think Gray is his name, will be quite good, but he has to get confirmed, and the Democrats slow walk that to delay cleaning house at the agency. Last news item I have, well, two. One is, I don't think an alarm went off in your house, or I hope it didn't, but Donald Trump has now cut the national debt by $100 billion since he took office. You may not have an alarm that sounds like your smoke alarm, but, you know, a debt clock or something like that. $100 billion. That ain't hay. And that's not a projected 10-year number. That's from January 21st, 2017 until today. It's down $100 billion. Now, lest you get elated, the numbers are, it has dropped from 19 trillion 947 billion to 19 trillion 845 billion. A vast improvement. Now, there's another perspective that I found interesting. Right now, there's a lot of negotiation going on between the U.S. and China about intellectual piracy and property rights in information. And I used to study in the 80s and 90s how Japan was doing so well relative to the United States. And I concluded that it was their R&D, that Japan really was way ahead of the rest of the world in developing new technologies, miniaturizing technologies, and inventing them so that they were consumer-friendly. But China's never done that. China's R&D budget is its espionage budget. China steals, Japan invented. If the United States made no technological innovations, China wouldn't, because it steals them. Whenever a company wants to access this vast market in China, they have to partner, in quotes, with the Chinese company, which has to own the deal, has to control the flow of information, and has to have first dibs on the technology and the ability to apply it everywhere. So China's strategy for economic growth is larceny, espionage, spying, and it's very different from the situation with Japan. Well, thank you.
Oh, don't
I'm
go
sorry,
away yet.
we got more.
I have to look at something first, but I was wondering, normally we do this on Friday as a fun way to end the week, but since we're celebrating the launch of the Watch channel, would you mind doing another Winston Churchill story?
Oh, my God. You know, you have me confused with a jukebox. Churchill was visiting Roosevelt. And he was staying in the White House. And in the east wing of the White House, where he was staying, the home end, there were offices and there were public rooms and there were private rooms. And it's hard very often to tell what's behind one of the doors. Well, he walked in, Roosevelt was there, and he wanted to see Churchill. So he went to the ground floor, and he wheeled his chair up to what he thought was Churchill's room. He thought it was the office for Churchill. And they opened the door for him, and he burst in, and there was Churchill standing butt naked, completely naked, all ruby and red-cheeked and red every place else. And Roosevelt was blanched and said, "Oh, I'll back out." And Churchill said, "No, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the British Empire has nothing to hide from the President of the United States of America."
Excellent. And before we leave, I just want everybody to know the facebook.com/watch link is not active for the general public until August 29th. But you viewers can click the new Deep Six Watch page link right now at this special link, which is pinned to the top of your comments. So,
in other words, you can't go to Facebook/watch unless you're one of the select 1% that are part of the alpha test. But you can go to facebook.com/Deep Six, the Deep State, all as one word.
Right.
And 6 is a number, not a letter.
And the link is pinned right to the comments.
Okay.
In this video.
Thanks a
Okay.
lot. Thanks for watching.